Good afternoon, Artificial Hearts. It's me again. It's so great to have you all here with us on the platform. Today, we have a very special guest, New York Times journalist, Harvard Law, uh, Cristian Farias. Pleasure to have you here with us, man. We're really glad you're here with us.
Guillermo, it's my pleasure. And you're recording, right?
Yeah, we're recording.
Sure, just checking.
No, that's cool. Yeah,
And
man. I just wanted to,
just to
yeah.
clarify a little bit, I'm not currently with the New York Times. I have written for the New York Times many times, but I used to be on the board, on the editorial board, and I have fond memories of being in that building. And it's always special to move in those spaces.
No, for sure, man. And we definitely want to hear a little bit more about your experience, not only the New York Times, but your experience, your very wide experience as a journalist, also as an attorney. And we're really glad to have you. But before we dive into that, Christian, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself, like who you are, where you're coming from, and what you're doing currently?
Sure. So my name is Cristian Farias. That's the English
Yeah.
version. If you wanna get my attention in Spanish, Cristian Farias.
Adios.
Whichever way, it doesn't matter. But yeah, I'm a legal journalist. Although even though legal journalist is a title that I've had for the past 10 years, before that I was a law student. Before that, I was a probation officer with the New Jersey court system. Before that, I was just a regular journalist, freelance journalist, writing about music and entertainment and all these different things. And before that, I was a knucklehead. I didn't know what to do with my life. I was confused, dazed, and without direction in what to do. But here I am now. And yeah, it's been an exciting career in the sense that it's been very unpredictable. These days, I'm a senior editor at Inquest. Inquest is an online magazine published by the Institute to End Mass Incarceration at Harvard Law School. I helped co-found this magazine almost 4 years ago. That's when I started at Harvard in November of 2020. And from November 2020 until July 2021, we were planning what would become Inquest. And since then, it has blossomed into this very powerful platform for people who are working and thinking hard about how to end mass incarceration in the United States. For people who may not be familiar, the US is the leading incarcerator in the whole world. Even though it's a rich, so-called developed nation, it is very barbaric and retrograde when it comes to punishment and when it comes to locking people up. And the fact that there is about 1 in 300 people who are in prison and millions more who are under some form of state surveillance or just monitoring, it just lets you know how big a problem it is. In the United States, we throw punishment at everything. We throw the criminal legal system at everything, rather than provide for education or public health or just other things to help people thrive and grow. We turn to cops and prisons to make sure to keep people contained when they don't live up to a certain standard. So yeah, and so we publish a lot of voices and people who are very much invested in the fight against mass incarceration. And I write for Inquest sometimes, although my lead job is as an editor. I edit people who are doing this work. And so yeah, I'm always reading really smart people who are doing this, and they help me become smarter because I don't know everything there is to know about this because it's a very complex issue. But
Wow.
it's a blessing to be able to do it.
Were you the main founder of Inquest?
No, I'm not the main founder. I'm one of three.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, there was the faculty director for the institute. His name is Andrew Crespo. He's a law professor at Harvard Law School. And then Premal Daria, she is the executive director, and she is a former public defender. Andrew also is a former public defender. So it's two former public defenders and a journalist who wanted to be a public defender but never was. I did work one summer for a public defender's office when I was at law school. But yeah, the three of us kind of came together, and they provided kind of the intellectual basis for Inquest, and I provided kind of the journalistic, technical background on how to get this off the ground. So it's very, very cool mix of different skill sets, and we were able to bring it to fruition. People check it out, inquest.org. Lots of great articles, and it's a beautiful site too. That's one thing I also do at the site. If you go to inquest.org and you see, wow, this looks beautiful. I probably had a hand in that beautiful artwork you see, because I pick it all.
You paint?
Wait, what?
You draw?
No. Like
Oh,
the artwork, like the illustrations, all the visual aesthetic. No, I don't do that. But I
oh,
do have a good eye for the site to
the
look the way.
concept. Okay, you helped with the concept.
Yeah, the concept and just
Gotcha.
the visual
Right.
direction, the aesthetic direction of the site. I'm a big part of that. So and I always put a lot of thought into even the headlines and the sub headlines. We try to be impactful and purposeful in everything we do, because we want a lot of people to read us. So that's why we do the way we do.
Awesome. And like I want to get back to that because I know that's a really important topic that I want to talk about. But I kind of want our the folks who are going to be watching this, our followers online on YouTube, on social media. I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about like your trajectory. I think you kind of ironically, right, said that at one time you were a knucklehead. I think we were all knuckleheads at one point. And how did this journey of you going into journalism kind of give you some purpose and give you some meaning? I know like we see a lot of young men today kind of like struggling. How was this journey like to becoming a journalist? And how was it starting off as an entertainment journalist?
Yeah. So when I started, I after finishing high school here in the U.S., as you probably know, I'm an immigrant to this country. I have a twin brother and my mom. The three of us came to this country many years ago, back in 1997, and our goal was never to put down roots and to stay in this country. It was always to finish high school, learn some English, and go back to Chile, which is where I'm from. And well, my brother went back. My brother actually did go back to Chile. He went to the Adventist University there to be a pastor. And he is a pastor now. He's a missionary out in Israel. And my mother supported him through that. But my mother also went back to Chile. It's a long yarn. It's a long story. I'm not going to explain it all to you. But when my mom went back, I stayed all alone here. And I said, what am I going to do all alone in this country with I didn't have a degree. I was working like odd jobs. So I was undocumented at the time too. I went into this country with a visa, but I overstayed it. And, here I am. Is that a secret? I mean, the government has my record, so I have nothing to hide. But, and yeah, so, and I was like, what is this undocumented kid going to do? Nothing. So it was a very tough choice. I was like, I think I'm gonna have to leave because this country, for people who don't know, is a very tough country. If you don't have papers, if you don't have
Oh
the
yeah, for
means
sure. Yeah.
to do things, you have to have, you know, just your documentation in order to be able to work, to go to school, et cetera, et cetera. So, and so but in that uncertainty, believe it or not, I started freelancing. I started freelancing because when you're a freelancer, you're an independent contractor. You're not you're not working for someone as their employee. You can bill them for your work and you get a paycheck for it. And I was able to do that. I was able to uh, you know, uh, I was able to get ahead with that. Obviously, when you're brand new, it's really tough because you don't make a lot of money. You don't get paid a lot. I think I used to get paid $35 for one music review when I first started, sometimes $25. Anyway, that's just a start. So I would
Was
have
this
to
in
add
the
up.
90s, Christian? Sorry to
No,
interrupt.
no, this was in early
Early
2000s.
2000s. Oh, sorry. I know you're young. I know you're young. I was just curious, like, what
No,
kind
I'm
of music
old.
were you
I'm old.
reviewing?
But yeah, so it was early 2000s, and so it was tough. I was blessed that I have one uncle who was living here in the U.S. And I was living with that uncle, so that provided me a little bit of support.
Uh-huh.
Because if that uncle wasn't here, I have no idea what I would have done. But anyway, that uncle was here, and that really was kind of a way to feel a little bit grounded. Also, I was going to church. Church also was a big grounding thing because you have a community. If you don't have a community, if you don't have family, which I didn't because both my brother and my mom had gone back to Chile, it's very tough. Also, one thing that helped right around the time that my mom went back was that I started dating this wonderful girl at the time, who many years later became my wife. But having a girlfriend also gave me some grounding because, you again, you need people to support you. No man is an island, as they say. You cannot be on your own, or thrive on your own. So having those supports really helped me. And yeah, having a place to lay my head at night and knowing that uh, I had a way to survive was very helpful. But anyway, I did a lot of freelancing, and freelancing was kind of what got me into that. And as an entertainment journalist, especially focused on music, I was doing a lot of music reviews. I was interviewing people. I was going to shows late at night. And it's perfect when you're single and you have not a worry in the world. You can stay up late at night, uh, watch a show and write about it in the morning, or that same night or whatever. My sleeping patterns were a mess. They're not
Wow.
any they're not any better now, but they were definitely a mess then. And that's when I did a couple of years of that. When then I went to school for journalism. I went to community college
Oh.
to get a degree in communications, and then later transferred to Rutgers to study journalism formally, to learn kind of the formal way to do journalism, even though I was already doing it and I was getting coached on it from editors who I worked with. So
Did it help the school?
it helped me a little bit just to see how the sausage gets made and to see
Oh.
the different kinds of journalism that exist. Because I was doing online journalism, but I learned about magazine journalism. I learned about newspaper journalism, beat reporting, which is very different from what I was doing. And learning those things, I think, really helped just to kind of see the breadth of the profession. There's broadcast journalism, which I didn't do.
Hmm.
Uh, and yeah, and obviously, the way I learned journalism then is nothing like the journalism that exists now with social media and so many other forms of citizen journalism and content creation.
Do you hate that word?
Now the journalists have to be content creators.
Content creator.
So I mean, I guess
Here, take this content, this
I,
this
I,
content. It's
I guess I'm a content creator too, but
yeah.
yes, you have to dominate every single thing. You have to go in the field with a camera and a microphone and a notepad, not just a notepad. Like I went to school when you would just go to cover an event with a notepad. Now that's not good enough. Now you need your phone and you need all these other devices to be able to make the story pop. So again, I wasn't trained in those things, but I've had to learn them because that's where kind of things were headed many years later. But
What kind of genre music were you covering at the time? Like what was like maybe the coolest interview you had during that time?
that's an easy one. Believe it or not, I guess, based on my own convictions and who I am, I wrote about everything. But the one subject that I really excelled at, believe it or not, was gospel music.
Oh,
I
cool.
became an expert in kind of the Christian subculture and gospel music and
Like
and
Kirk
and
Franklin?
all of that, all of
All of
that.
that. Oh.
I did a cover story on Kirk Franklin for a magazine that doesn't exist anymore called
Re-
CCM Magazine. So
Wow.
yeah, I went to I went to meet him at his hotel in New York City and shadowed him for like 2 days
Was
and
that
did this.
dope?
It was great. I mean, it was awesome. And maybe I can find it and send it to you so you can look at it. But yeah, I did a whole story on him and the album that he had released at the time. Uh, but he was not the coolest interview that I did. The coolest interview I ever did. Oh, I also met Bono of U2
What?
early on in my
Oh
career.
wow, that's sick.
Uh, but anyway,
Are they nice in person, man? Like
I,
for
I didn't
journalists?
I didn't interview the whole band. It was only Bono. He was launching some campaign in Pennsylvania, and I went to see him. And I
Oh,
was at a press conference where he was. I didn't interview him personally, but I was there, and I wrote about it. It was cool. I felt like it was a big deal. I was brand new at this when I wrote that
wow.
piece. And
That
I
was
wrote
the
a lot.
coolest you said, right?
Yeah, well, the coolest, but before I say it, I wrote a lot for a magazine that still exists today, is the biggest mainstream evangelical publication in the US. It's called Christianity Today.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. In Chicago,
and
right?
out in Chicago, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Ann Arbor, yeah.
And and I became one of their regular contributors to their music channel and their entertainment page. And as part of that gig, which I did as a freelancer the whole time, I interviewed a singer who recently, or a couple years ago, passed away. Her name is Sinead O'Connor. She
Oh yeah,
is
from the
from
zombie cranberries.
no, no, they look similar because of the shaved head.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
Sinead O'Connor also, she's the one who sang "Nothing Compares to You." She's the one who ripped the picture of the Pope
Oh
at a
yeah.
Saturday Night Live.
Oh my
This was
God.
You're probably a baby when this happened, but anyway, this is a big deal at the time. And yeah, she got a lot of criticism for that. She almost lost her career when she ripped up the picture of the Pope. Um, but yeah, I interviewed her when she released a double gospel album about Jesus and God and her journey of faith. And I went to see her in concert in New York City. And because she was promoting this album to Christian audiences, she didn't want a single interview with Rolling Stone or Billboard or all the big music magazines. She only wanted to do press with Christian journalists.
Oh cool.
So she invited me backstage. I was the only person allowed to interview her for that one concert.
Sick.
So I was backstage talking to her. I don't remember if it was before or after the concert, but it was great. And it was on the homepage. It was a big deal at the time. And when she died, I got really sad because that was one big memory that I made when I
For
was
sure.
a journalist. And I remember the title of that interview. It is funny because Sinead O'Connor has had a rough upbringing. She had a rough life, a lot of spiritual abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse as part of her upbringing, and also in the Catholic Church. And but her album and her views are a little bit strange. They were definitely not mainstream. So my editor titled the piece, "Jesus is, quote, like an energy." So so anyway, almost like new agey in her way of thinking about God and faith.
Yeah.
But
But
anyway,
but when she did that, was that kind of like she had sort of like a conversion experience?
I don't know if she had a conversion experience so much as she was channeling everything that she had learned as a young woman, and she was trying to make sense of it in her own personal secular life. She didn't have a Jesus experience or conversion. She was not a card carrying Christian. She was just expressing and processing a lot of trauma that I think that she faced
Right.
at the point. And yeah, and so it was kind of a way to express in music things that she once believed. I don't know if she believed them at the time that I interviewed her, but definitely she was going through some journey, and to an extent we all are in our own journey. So who am I to judge her for that? And I pray that she made her peace before she died with
Right.
God. But yeah, she was in a journey, and we're all at
Was
different
she cool to
stages.
you when you met her?
She was she what?
Was she like tight, like cool with you?
Was she cool? She was cool. I mean, she was very open, and she
Oh,
answered all questions. She wasn't defensive.
right.
She kind of had this aura about her because she was so
Yeah,
famous.
Sinead O'Connor. Yeah.
So, but anyway, it was definitely a highlight for me. And yeah, I'm proud of that's probably my proudest moment as a music journalist.
Oh man, bro, I got like so many questions, but because I know we do have to get to like the mass incarceration, but just on this kind of the entertainment and the journalism scene, do you
Yeah.
feel like evangelical music, like the industry has changed a lot? Because I grew up in here in the States too in like the early 2000s, and it seemed like evangelical music was so mainstream at one, or maybe I don't know, maybe that was just the fact that I happen to live in a very evangelical area, but like you would see movies and there seemed to be like this very kind of strong evangelical presence or gospel music culture and in entertainment and industry and all that. Do you think that's still a thing now, or do you think it's like changing?
It's still a thing, and obviously because of the problems with the music industry in terms of the downturn in the sales, the fact of things going to streaming, the decline of CDs. For people who know what CD, do you know what CDs are? Anyway, but the
Yeah.
decline of physical media and just the fact that everyone's streaming these days, the industry had to adapt. But one thing about Christian music that I always found odd was that it was always a subculture to me, in the sense that uh, all these labels were owned by the major conglomerates, all the big music labels, but they were very much based out of Nashville. A lot of it was very kind of countrified and kind of in this bubble in Nashville. And in a way, it still remains in that bubble. And there are a few artists who break out of that bubble. You have people like Amy Grant, you have people like others that like Tori Kelly, and others that have more mainstream appeal. Uh, but but one thing that struck me as odd, and that still strikes me as odd, is that because these are Christian entertainers, they make art for a Christian audience, for the subculture. Uh, one question that I can never answer, and I still haven't been able to answer, is to what extent they are doing this for, and this is going to sound weird, are they doing this for God, or are they doing this for the money? Because they have to sustain themselves, they have to
Well,
live off of
yeah.
this. And
Legitimate
also,
question, by the way. Is it like just a cultural Christianity, or is it something they really believe in, right?
right, and the reality is that because it's a subculture for Christians, by Christians, in a Christian world, there's very high expectations of the way you ought to live, of the way you ought to talk. Uh, I don't know what kind of spiritual grounding these people have. When you give a concert, you're expected to speak the language of scripture and speak almost like a preacher. Are these people even equipped to preach to their audiences in a way that doesn't sound fake, or that is truly spiritually grounded? Like I truly do wonder, and I think part of the big burden that a lot of these artists have is that they have to create music, obviously, that's appealing to the listeners, but also, they're expected to feed their audiences in a spiritual way. And I want to get my nourishment from artists. I don't think
Yeah.
I don't listen to music for that reason. I listen to music because I want to be moved by it and like it. But the fact that there's this extra expectation that they have to speak perfectly and not curse or not smoke, or I don't know, even live perfect lives. I don't know. It seems like a lot of pressure to put on a person. So yeah, for that reason, I don't know. I don't know that it's necessarily a healthy way to conduct. Like I would prefer a person who happens to be a Christian, and there are some bands that I like there's a group called Switchfoot that they've been at it for more than
Oh
20 years.
yeah, for
And
sure. Yeah.
they were able to break out in the mainstream,
Yeah,
but they don't pretend to be Bible thumpers or to play
exactly. Yeah.
churches. Like they are messy
Yeah,
kind
they
of.
do. They're yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. I think
Yeah.
their image is like we do secular music that's done by people who happen to be Christian.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if they smoke or they live differently. But again, if they do, who cares? I like the music. Like, why do they have to live in a certain way in order for their art to be valid? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So anyway,
you're not voting for a
that's a
pastor.
whole other topic. It's very controversial or whatever. But again, I rather just listen to good art, good music that moves me. Not necessarily.
Beethoven smoked.
Was that?
No, I think Beethoven had a very alternative lifestyle than we do,
Yeah, no, totally, and
or
and so
Mozart.
so yeah, so it's a strange kind of world looking back at it. But I made some money working in that world, and I appreciate that it had a formative effect on me in my career. But yeah, I wouldn't go back to it because I'm in a different world these days.
And yeah, and how was that kind of transition from working as like an entertainment journalist, covering all these like cool musical artists in the gospel world and the outside, like in the secular world? Yeah, so like, what kind of prompted you to go into like political journalism and getting involved with these like very hot button political questions?
Yeah, so the reason is that I made that transition wasn't one that I was looking for. Actually, before I even went into legal and political journalism, I uh, I started working for the state of New Jersey as a probation officer. When I signed up for that job, I kid you not, I didn't know what a probation officer was. I won't give you the long story, but basically, I had recently gotten married at the time, and I kind of got tired of being a reporter. Like I was tired of the long hours and sleeping terribly, and just having all these. I wanted a regular paycheck, so to speak. I just wanted a regular job.
Like a 9 to 5?
Yeah, like a 9 to 5, and I had just got married, and I wanted some normalcy and some structure to my life. So I found this state job, and but it completely gave me a new outlook into the criminal justice system, which I had zero knowledge of at the time. And I got a crash course into what it's like to supervise people who have been sentenced to a term of probation. Probation is basically when you're under the supervision of the state for having engaged in some kind of an offense in the third or the fourth degree in the state of New Jersey, and as a result, instead of being incarcerated, you are supervised by an officer who makes sure that between 1 and 5 years that you don't get into any trouble, and that you comply with all these conditions of probation. And if you do comply after your set term of probation, you get to go free. The conviction stays on your record. You still are, quote unquote, convicted felon, words that I absolutely abhor and I don't use because I don't think we should label people by the worst thing they've ever done. But anyway, that conviction stays on your record, but you're a free person. But probation is hard. Probation, you have to go to school, keep a job. You have to open your house to your probation officer who can visit you at any time. You have the power to seize someone's property or search their computer or pat them down. I never did that, but I had that power. And you can visit them at their job, at home. You can take a urine sample from them to make sure they're not using drugs. You have to supervise that they're going to their treatment, anger management, Alcoholics Anonymous, mental health evaluations. There's all these conditions that the court imposes, not in every case, but in some cases. There's standard conditions and specialized conditions. You have to make sure that they obey, that they comply with the rules. And if they do, they succeed. And if they don't, they could go to prison for their original offense. So after doing that for almost 3 years, it was almost like 2.5 years that I did that. And I said, no, I need to go to law school. I need to learn the system better. I need to learn the laws and the rules so that I can defend these people, so that I can become a public defender possibly, or a civil rights attorney. So I need to learn the law. So I quit and I started going to law school. And when I went to law school was when, thinking that I was going to be a public defender, instead, journalism in a way called me back. I started learning how law works, how the Constitution works, how our systems and institutions operate or do not operate. And I started kind of getting really interested in how to communicate these ideas to a broad audience. And that's when I started writing about civil rights, voting rights, police brutality. I don't know if you know, but around 2004, when I graduated, 2014, sorry, when I graduated law school, there was a lot of protests for racial justice at the time.
Yeah.
Ferguson happened. Eric Garner was murdered in New York City. There was tons of movement on ending police brutality. So it was a kind of an exciting moment to start being a legal journalist. And obviously not knowing this field whatsoever, not knowing anyone, not having any connections, not knowing the players or the publications that might be interested in me. I started just kind of knocking on random doors and kind of cold emailing folks and pitching stories or ideas. And some got accepted, others didn't get accepted, got many rejections, but I kept doing it and honing my voice, honing my style, and becoming a stronger writer on those issues, and learning just from from writing and seeing my name in a byline again, seeing that analysis published kind of does something in you when you see your name writing a big profile piece or even a small profile piece. It just helps you to think and to get into a mindset. Maybe I can do this. And you know, and I started in 2014, and since then I never looked back.
What is something that you wish like people who are not in that world knew about like criminal justice in the US or like the criminal justice system in America?
Well, people who are not in the, well, I would challenge that premise a little bit because many people know exactly what criminal justice is. They just don't realize it. Many people have experience or know someone who has been jailed, who has gone to prison, who may be on probation, who has gotten deported. Many people have a working knowledge of what it's like to break some kind of a rule and get in trouble for it. So many people have had contact with this thing we call the legal system. Now, they may not have been arrested, they may have not been spent time in a lockup, but because of how pervasive the criminal system is, many of us do know of people who have been ensnared in it. So, but something that I would say a lot of people that don't know about the criminal justice system is that criminal justice is a misnomer. A misnomer means is just incorrectly named because this system doesn't care so much about justice. This system cares more about convictions. This system gets more about giving people their just desserts. And as I was saying at the top of this conversation, in the United States, we throw jail, prison, and police at everything or at many things. So if there's a person experiencing homelessness or drug abuse, we throw cops and prisons at them rather than giving them the help that they need. So because we're so used to using jails and prisons and cops to diagnose and treat some of these social problems that we're facing, we spend a lot of money in this system. The system is not so much concerned with seeking or finding justice. Is basically more of a system of social control, because since we don't have the tools or the funding for a lot of these programs that may help people live better lives, and we rather hide the problems with jails and prisons, it's no wonder that then we're the leading incarcerator in the world, because we much rather throw billions and billions of dollars to these carceral systems than invest this money in these other more difficult solutions. Obviously, because homelessness is not easy to solve. Food insecurity is not easy to solve. Poor performing schools are not easy to solve. You need teachers, you need long-term investment. And because those problems may seem very difficult to fix, we rather, use the criminal system in order to try to remove the people that do not live up to the standard that we have set on things, how things ought to be. So if someone is living on the street, we rather jail them and give them housing in a jail rather than in the street. As harsh as that sounds, that's how it happens in many places. So yeah, one thing that people might not know about criminal justice system is that justice has very little to do with it.
I want us to talk a little bit about how faith communities can kind of remediate some of the problems that you mentioned with regards to incarceration. But before we do that, you know who was incarcerated? Fyodor Dostoevsky. And we have this mug here from our Artificial Hearts sci-fi readaptation of Dostoevsky's classic, The Brothers Karamazov. So not Crime and Punishment, but The Brothers Karamazov.
Oh.
And that kind of brings us to a topic, which is Dostoevsky once said that if anything preserves society, even our time, and even transforms and regenerates the criminal, it is only the law of Christ. So I wanted to ask you, what role do you think that faith communities, that churches can play in remediating some of these problems that we have with the criminal justice system?
Well, unfortunately, in this country, faith communities have a bad reputation when it comes to the criminal justice system, in the sense that we don't see faith communities leading the charge against mass incarceration. Usually, we see other advocates doing it. We don't see faith leaders taking a firm stance on it. And one thing faith communities could get involved in the fight against mass incarceration is to start first theorizing how mass incarceration is related to the gospel in very real ways. And again, I'm not a person to be a theorist in this area, but Christians need for lack of a better word, they need a narrative connecting the gospel to the problem of mass incarceration. And the reality is that Jesus himself, when he is asked by his disciples, what can we do to how Jesus himself says basically that people who visited him in the jails, or people who clothed him, people who fed him, those are the ones who are his true followers. The reality is that Christians need to know what the realities of our prison system are. They need to become more informed on the issues. And the fact there are many in our own communities who have faced the problem of incarceration. And by incarceration, I don't just mean people who have been in prison proper, but also people who have had contacts with the immigration system, people who have been involved with probation and parole, and even the people who work in the system itself, whether they be lawyers, judges, public defenders, and others. We just need to be able to recognize how massive the problem is, and how in the same way that Christ came to set the captives free, that our role is also to try to help set people free in more ways than one. So definitely Christians need to theorize and create and connect the gospel to the problem of mass incarceration, which is one of the defining social injustices in the US, and be able to speak the language of freedom, of religious freedom, and somehow connect it to the fight for freedom of people that are in the system and that need freedom from it.
Well, that's awesome, man. I think that's a challenge, I think, to all of us, to see how we can do that more. But I wanted to kind of ask, I think like a lot of our viewers, like people who are going to be watching this, they're really curious to know, like, you also worked in that area as a journalist reporting on mass incarceration for the New York Times. How was that experience like?
Yeah, so back in 2018 and 2019, I sat on the editorial board of the New York Times. The editorial board is probably, if you've watched the news here in the US lately, editorial boards have been in the news because both the editorial board of the Washington Post and the LA Times declined to endorse a presidential candidate, Kamala Harris in this case, for the presidential election. Basically, the editorial board of a publication is a group of journalists who are subject matter experts in a given area, and their job is to know their specific field, know it well, and then based on their own reporting and observations, research, and background, to offer an informed opinion on what should be done to fix a given problem. And part of the job of an editorial board, aside from writing editorials that offer solutions, is to endorse candidates, is to take a position on public policies, to denounce problems with governance by sitting presidents or local elected leaders. So they're, in a way, the conscience of a publication. If reporters and editors on the news side are not supposed to have an opinion publicly because they're only supposed to report the facts, those on the editorial side, on the opinion side, and I should have noted at the beginning that in every publication, there's a division between the news section of the paper and the opinion section. The editorial board is on the opinion section, but there's a wall in between the two, and the two don't talk to each other. So those who work on the opinion side they're also journalists, but they're opinion journalists. They're not news journalists. And as an opinion journalist, you just have to be able to offer your best argument, offer it forcefully. And also one thing that editorials do is that they do it very succinctly. They teach you the art of economical writing. So writing for the editorial board was a wonderful opportunity because I got to take positions on big issues and even on candidates and meet with them and learn about problems and offer ideas on how to make the world a better place, literally. And in my area, it was legal issues and the Supreme Court. So whenever the Supreme Court was about to hear a case or there was a big legal issue happening with the Trump presidency at the time, Donald Trump was president, we would write about it. And as an editorial board member, you get to sit in these meetings with a number of bright people, bright opinion journalists who are also experts in their individual fields, whether it's the economy, the environment, politics, New York City, education, international affairs, Washington issues, the environment. You just to sit in that room with people who are very smart in different fields it's a very collegial experience, and I really enjoyed being there, exchanging ideas, kind of thinking of which could be a good position to take on what issue, and then to write about it and to do it in a forceful manner, and basically just to be able to, because even though we're opinion journalists, that doesn't mean we're uninformed. No, we still do a lot of reporting. We talk to experts, we talk to people, we read a lot, we research a lot. And then after having gathered all the evidence and all the support for our position, we write about it. And so it was just, it was a great experience. It was wonderful. And it made me a better journalist, I think. And it helped me more than anything to be able to make my point, make my case, in as little a space as possible, with forceful language, and do it in a way to try to convince whoever was reading the editorial.
What were some of like the major cases that you covered during that time that were kind of like memorable to you?
Yeah. Well, at the time, it was in the middle of the Trump years, so I did a lot of editorials about immigration. Also, at the time, there was a lot of controversy surrounding the 2020 census and whether non-citizens could be included in the 2020 census. There was a big Supreme Court case about that.
I remember that one.
There were a lot of uncertainty around Dreamers and DACA recipients and whether Trump could eliminate their protections under the law. So there were lots of I wrote several pieces around those issues, and then there were a lot of other kind of nerdier issues, but also no less important that at least to me they were a big deal, dealing with gun rights, dealing with the election of some not gun rights, but gun control and gun rights and the legal protections around them, and also the election of certain candidates for district attorney in New York City. I sat on some meetings to issue endorsements for certain candidates. So that was really interesting. But definitely the cases that had to do with immigration and pro-democracy, those were the ones that definitely stand out.
That famous one on like Muslim immigration, or like what they call the Muslim ban. Did you cover
The Muslim ban, I did cover that one. I did write about it, but not for the editorial board because at the time that had passed.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely is something that I have written about as well. And I hope I never get to write about that stuff again.
Oh, really?
Meaning, I hope all of that history doesn't repeat itself.
Oh, but I fear it will, my friend. Like
We'll see.
we're in for a ride. I mean, I hate to be like pessimistic, but
Yeah, Guillermo,
yeah,
don't
don't
be,
jinx it. I won't jinx you. Yeah, I
don't
won't
jinx
jinx
it.
you. Yeah, I won't jinx you. I'll let you live in Alice in Wonderland. I don't know. I guess it's just like in my PhD, I tend to be a little bit just like looking at the history. Yeah, it was funny. I was like, I'm sorry, I know this is kind of off topic, but I was just like talking to a former professor of mine about kind of the history of like religious freedom and like human rights and all of that. It's just like so depressing
Mhm.
seeing how like all these great ideas have been kind of like just stripped away and like our freedoms are kind of going down the drain. But I'll leave that for another topic. What I wanted to know though, how was like the experience covering the Supreme Court? I mean, obviously we talked about the cases that you covered. Were you going to the Supreme Court, or was it just more from like New York that you were writing?
I was both. I wrote about the Supreme Court from New York, but also I went in person to several hearings, both as a member of the editorial board, but also when I was a legal affairs reporter for the Huffington Post. I was a beat reporter at the time, and I was going constantly to Washington to cover cases and cover hearings. And yeah, it was just the beat of the Supreme Court is very interesting in the sense that
Yeah,
it's a very at once it's at once predictable in the sense that you know when the court is meeting to hear cases, um, and you know that they're going to hear this number of cases on any given topic, and all of that information is public. But it's unpredictable in the sense that you have no idea when the decisions are going to rule, how they're going to be ruled on, and and you have no idea when they're going to come out. So they surprise you uh, with how they go about deciding the cases. But yeah, it's definitely it was interesting while I was there, but at the same time it's a very punishing beat in the sense that it can be a little bit, all of the issues that they decide can be a little depressing sometimes.
I bet.
One, because it's a very conservative court, so it almost becomes predictable the way they're going to rule on certain issues,
Right.
especially those that have a very political
Like
uh,
immigration.
yeah, but political valence, and again, because the Supreme Court has a very conservative bent, just to be subjected to this onslaught of conservative decisions, it sometimes is like, what's going on here? I thought you're supposed to rule based on the facts and the law, but a lot of times it's not about the facts and the law. It's about, do we like the policy of the president or the party that we are assessing, and because of that, it's basically politics by another name. So
On a scale of 1 to 10, how politicized would you say it is?
well, I don't know if I would give it a number. I would just say that the Supreme Court is just another branch of government. They should be treated just like any other politician in Washington, in the sense that they are there to uphold or make policy. And because they're there to uphold or make policy that affects the whole nation, they are they are doing politics just like the other branches. They tell us that they're following the law, but the reality is that, they are deciding cases that send huge ripples through the entire nation. And for that reason, people should treat them as just like any other public official, except these ones are unelected, and they're there for life. So in a sense, the people should be able to exert some kind of a democratic check on them. Uh, and right now there's those discussions are happening in Washington. How do we check the Supreme Court that seems to be out of control,
Mm.
and that is not reflecting the will of the people, but is reflecting the will of a minority? Because the reality is that their views are many times the minority view, because the nation doesn't reflect the way that they rule on their cases.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And how do you see this election shaping the Supreme Court now?
Well, we have some, at least two justices that are getting pretty high up there in their age. And the reality
Clarence
is that
Thomas?
Clarence Thomas is one of them, and the other one is Samuel Alito.
Oh, Alito.
They're in their 70s, close to 80, but no, they're in their mid to late 70s, and because of that, they could just decide to quit, or maybe uh, God decides that they shouldn't be there anymore. No, I'm just kidding. But again, you never know what might happen. They might just die or just decide that they don't want to do it. And because of that, because we live in a country that basically gives power to these judges to decide when to quit whenever,
It's tenure, man. That's what I find it crazy.
we're
That means
at their
if like the
mercy.
guy has dementia, he can still be deciding cases.
Right, unless, yeah, you can't really force them off the court.
You have
Although
like Alzheimer's and still be ruling on First Amendment issues.
yeah. So for that reason, it's a very kind of interesting system here in the US compared to other parts of the world.
Do you think our system is
Uh,
geriatric? Sorry to cut you off, but I wanted to ask that before.
what?
Do you think we have a very geriatric system, like old people control everything?
I mean, I don't know if they control everything, but definitely, uh, I think, if they don't control everything, at least they should be able to rule in a way that reflects all of us and reflects kind of where the nation is today. Obviously, the Constitution and the laws say something and they ought to mean something definitive. But at the same time, the Supreme Court that we currently have tends to decide things in a way that they try to interpret the words in the Constitution the way they were interpreted or what they meant at the time they were ratified hundreds of years ago. So, to the extent we have these justices looking back to history to understand how the world worked at the time, I don't think that's a way that a nation should run because conditions change, situations change, and the Constitution needs to be adaptable to treat current problems. Uh, and the problem with the current court that we have is that they tend to look backward instead, and that's why it's very hard to move forward on a lot of the most pressing issues that the political branches are trying to solve these days. Whether that be the presidency or Congress, you'll have a few justices, at least five justices, saying, "Nope, you can't do that because, the law that Congress passed does not authorize student debt forgiveness on a massive scale, and therefore, sorry, student debtors, you cannot have your loan forgiven because that's not because we said so, basically, even though Congress has given the president tools to achieve some of those goals. So yeah, it's an interesting time to cover the court, but unless the composition of the court changes, if not in the next 4 years, in the next 8 years or whatever, we're stuck with it for as long as the current members stay on.
Yeah, no, I mean that's something I also kind of think a lot about. Like, well, I mean, kind of we see the effects of like what depending on the political orientation of the court, where it can kind of steer society, right? And I kind of wanted to ask you, as a journalist, somebody who is obviously committed to free speech, to freedom of the press, um, and this is obvious, but I think it's also kind of important to reiterate. Why do you believe that it's so important for all of us today in these times that we are living in these very kind of politically fractious times with all this kind of polarization? Why is it so important for us to continue to fight for a free press, regardless of our political affiliation?
Well, I think, if we've learned anything from the past couple of weeks is that the free press isn't so free when it is controlled by a few handful of very rich people. And there's a lot of kind of fear and hesitation and doubts about the future for many journalists, especially when uh, you know uh, the owners who have a lot of money and who may not be committed to necessarily to the same values that journalists may be committed to, have other interests. Their interest is the bottom line. Their interest is their other companies, and their return on their investment. It's we all have to be committed to not that system, but a system that is truly free in the sense that whether you're a journalist working for a publication, you're a blogger, you're a content creator on TikTok or whatever, just that you can disseminate ideas and points of view and arguments without the interference of the powerful. And the powerful means either those in power, the government, or those who kind of own these different platforms or the means of production, so to speak. So yeah, we'll have to be committed to that, and we need to support whoever is out there trying to be an informed citizenry, because the as your viewers, or as you know, the people perish when there's a lack of counsel. So
Amen.
we need to have access to as much information as possible so that we can make up our own views and our own minds. And one way to do that is by supporting the free flow of information, and by taking a skeptical look at the billionaires who are trying to control this information, as you probably have seen with what has happened to X and Twitter, and even other platforms like Facebook and Meta, and
Google. How do they have so much power, man?
and not just power, but they decide what people see and what people read, and their algorithms spoon feed you what you should be reading, and you
That's
have
crazy.
zero control over the information that is in front of you. So yeah, we should be supporting platforms that give us full control over that information. That's why I'm a fan of Blue Sky, which I've mentioned to you before,
Yeah, yeah.
which you have complete control over the stuff that you see, and yeah. So to the extent we give people more freedom in the choices and the information they take without control from the powerful, the better off we'll be.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely in the future, man. I want to do one on like media bias or like the algorithm. I definitely think that's something that I think people, we don't reflect enough about how much of that is being filtered through these algorithms, like to make us believe what we want to believe. I think even with elections, like I think the results that you think of the election are really and are in a lot of ways kind of mediated by kind of our own biases. But anyway, man, I wanted to end. Well, first of all, thank you for your availability coming here on the platform. I wanted to hear from you. Artificial Hearts, we're a podcast dedicated to disseminating the works of Dostoevsky in a contemporary fashion and humanizing the hearts that have become cold through relativistic secularism. I wanted to know, like, how has this work of being a journalist, working in favor of justice, combating mass incarceration, how has this kind of made you more human?
Wow, that's a big question. How has this work made me more human? It has made me more human in the sense that it has made me value the things that I currently have and hold, like family, faith, and just the ability to 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 enjoy those people who are closest to me. Because working in media, working even in the field that I am now, and editing stories dealing with mass incarceration, a lot of it can be a bit of a not depressing, because a lot of it is exciting, but definitely, there's a lot of hurt and pain in the world. There's you come in contact with a lot of human suffering through the words that you're either writing or reading or editing. And so that can be hard on your soul. That can be hard on your heart and your mind. So in a sense, and also for work, I have to be connected to a lot of these social media platforms, which totally poison my brain. So I've gotten to appreciate those times that I'm not connected and that I'm spending with my family, and that I'm or just heading off to the beach by myself to just enjoy the sun and the sand and the seagulls. Because again, it's the things, those simple things that God created, nature, family, and your family of faith, that those are the things that truly matter. So this work has made me more human, not the work itself, but in what has made me appreciate the things when I'm not doing that work, being able to strike that balance, it is really good, and that's what keeps me going.
Awesome. We want to thank you, Christian, and we want to thank you all for watching another episode of Artificial Hearts podcast.